Everything we thought we knew about history was just the version we were allowed to remember. What if beneath the marble floors of cathedrals, behind the silence of confessionals, inside the most sacred city on earth, lies not salvation, but secrets? Locked away in chambers never seen by the public, buried under centuries of ritual, politics, and power, is a world the Vatican never intended to share. And among its most whispered rumors is one so staggering, it could rewrite the legacy of an ancient king and shake the foundations of Christianity itself. The mystery of Alexander the Great and the saint who may not be a saint at all. This is not conspiracy. This is history that vanished too perfectly. He was known as a god among men, a conqueror whose name made cities tremble, Alexander the Great, ruler of the known world before the age of 33. And yet, for all his glory, his final chapter is missing. No tomb, no grave, no body ever found. How does the most important corpse of the ancient world simply disappear? For centuries, scholars searched. They scoured Alexandria, deserts, ruins, hunting for even a trace of his resting place. But they found only silence, until whispers began to surface. Whispers of a body that had been stolen, smuggled across borders, and entombed beneath the golden domes of St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, hidden in plain sight. How is this possible? According to an unsettling theory, the body believed to be St. Mark the Evangelist, revered by millions of Christians, may actually be Alexander the Great. Here's how the story goes. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his embalmed remains were placed in Alexandria, not just as a burial, but as a shrine, a place where emperors and generals paid homage. Julius Caesar visited, so did Augustus. For centuries, his tomb was common knowledge. Then, something strange happened. Just a few generations later, the trail went cold. His tomb vanished from the historical record, as if deliberately erased. Fast forward to the 9th century. A Venetian merchant, under mysterious circumstances, brought a body back from Alexandria to Italy. It was declared to be Saint Mark, a foundational figure in Christian history. His remains were placed in a magnificent basilica built in his honor, Basilica di San Marco. But recent studies and historical inconsistencies have cast doubt. The timelines don't match, descriptions don't align, and the origin of the body has never been conclusively proven. If this theory is true, if the remains beneath St. Mark's Basilica are those of Alexander the Great, then for over 1,000 years, pilgrims, priests, and popes have bowed before a tomb of a pagan emperor, believing it to be the final resting place of a Christian saint. Was this a historical accident, or a deliberate deception? Was it a holy mistake made in faith, or the most successful cover-up in Western history? Because if the truth ever comes to light, it won't just challenge our understanding of the ancient world. It may force us to confront a more chilling question. How many more truths lie buried under sacred stone? And how many more emperors wear the masks of saints? Some stories are passed down through scripture, others through whispers carved into stone. But then there are those that survive in symbols, quiet echoes across civilizations, repeating themselves through time, until the line between coincidence and design begins to blur. One such echo starts in the deserts of ancient Egypt and finds its reflection in the life of Jesus Christ. At first glance, it feels impossible, even offensive to some. But as scholars began peeling back the layers of religious history, an unsettling possibility emerged. What if the story of Jesus was not the first of its kind? What if it was a retelling? Thousands of years before the rise of Christianity, the Egyptians worshipped a divine child, the falcon-headed god Horus, and his life bears strange and striking similarities to the man who would later be called the Son of God. Horus was said to be born of a virgin named Mary, an early form of the name Mary. His birth, too, was foretold by angels. A bright star shone in the sky the night he was born. 3 wise men, or, in some versions, shepherds, came bearing gifts. And like Jesus, Horus had a stepfather, Seb, a name that also appears in Egyptian mythology as a god of the earth. As he grew, Horus was baptized in a river. He preached to followers. He healed the sick. He cast out demons. He even raised the dead. He had 12 disciples, and then he was betrayed, tried, executed, and 3 days later, he rose again. It sounds impossible, too parallel, too precise. And yet the records, fragmented, incomplete, debated, still exist. Many argue the texts are misinterpreted, or the connections exaggerated. They claim Horus had only 4 disciples, not 12, that he wasn't crucified, but murdered in a mythic battle, that his story was metaphorical, not literal. But still, the resemblances are hard to ignore. Inside the vaults of the Vatican, buried beneath centuries of canon law, lie manuscripts that were never included in the modern Bible. Some speak of different messiahs. Others suggest that early Christianity evolved by adopting and reshaping far older stories. Stories once told under the burning sun of Egypt, not the hills of Galilee. The Vatican has always denied the Horus theory. The Church has dismissed it as dangerous speculation. But scholars outside its walls continue to question. Why are the parallels so precise? And why do so many ancient symbols seem to echo across different faiths, like a song rewritten in new languages? If the story of Horus was indeed a blueprint, then what we know as divine may in part be inherited, not invented. But here's the question that haunts those who dare to explore this path. Is it truly heresy to notice the patterns of the past? Or is it fear? Fear that the truth, once uncovered, might look too familiar. If ancient gods gave rise to sacred stories, and if those stories were reshaped by empires, then perhaps the question isn't who told it first, but rather, why has it always been told the same way? There are places so powerful. They don't just store knowledge, they define it, shape it, control who gets to remember and who is condemned to forget. For centuries, no place represented that power more than the Library of Alexandria. Imagine it. Stone colonnades gleaming under Mediterranean sun. Scrolls stacked by the hundreds of thousands, whispers of philosophers in every language, Babylonian astronomy beside Indian mathematics, Greek geometry interwoven with ancient African medicine. It wasn't just a library. It was the brain of the ancient world, a superconductor of human thought. And then it vanished. Not just destroyed, but erased. No ruins, no vaults, just silence. But what if it didn't burn? What if the fire was a story, and the real treasure was quietly stolen and hidden somewhere else? That question, that possibility, is what's kept historians awake for centuries. Because in the shadows of the Vatican, that's exactly where some believe the Library of Alexandria still lives. According to fringe scholars, blacklisted researchers, and even a few daring insiders, a portion of the library's most valuable scrolls, documents on pre-Christian religion, astronomy, medicine, even lost continents, were secretly rescued. How? Some say during the siege of Alexandria by Julius Caesar in 48 BCE, a coordinated smuggling took place. While the public library may have burned, a second archive, a hidden one, was emptied. Scrolls, maps, and forbidden writings were ferried across the Mediterranean under the protection of certain Roman elites, and eventually into the hands of the early Church. Others claim the Vatican obtained the manuscripts much later, through private auctions, royal collections, or post-Crusade seizures. Either way, if true, this would make the Vatican's secret archive not just a religious repository, but the last surviving fragment of Earth's oldest knowledge system. Today, the Vatican's archives are protected by armed guards. Only a handful of vetted scholars are allowed inside, and even then, only with written approval and timed visits. There are vaults within vaults, rooms that haven't been opened in decades, manuscripts that have never been digitally scanned, never shown to the public. And among them, some believe there are scrolls with pre-flood maps, astronomical models thousands of years ahead of their time, and philosophies so radical they'd fracture the foundations of modern religion. There's no proof, but there's something else, something more chilling. In 1996, a researcher from Germany, granted limited access to a small chamber within the archive, described a book, leather-bound, pre-medieval, filled with illustrations of stars and planetary orbits that did not match our known solar system. He was never invited back. No record of the manuscript exists today. Coincidence or controlled amnesia? Because if the Vatican truly holds what remains of the lost Library of Alexandria, then our current history, our entire understanding of what humans knew and when, could be a beautifully curated illusion. The kind of illusion designed not to protect the truth, but to own it. And here's the dopamine trigger most viewers never shake. If the greatest library in human history never died, and if it's hidden behind Vatican walls, waiting to be unlocked, what else have we never been allowed to remember? In the heart of Vatican City, behind marble statues of saints and under the shadow of Michelangelo's dome, there is a room that feels out of place. Its walls are lined not with crucifixes, but with hieroglyphs. Its guardians are not apostles, but stone-faced gods from another world. And its treasures? They come not from Bethlehem or Jerusalem, but from the scorched sands of ancient Egypt. They call it the Gregorian Egyptian Museum, created in 1839 under Pope Gregory XVI. 9 galleries sealed within the Vatican walls. Inside, towering statues of Horus, Anubis, Isis, painted sarcophagi, mummified hands, cursed amulets, and relics pulled from tombs thousands of years older than Christianity itself. But the question is not what these relics are. The real question is, why are they here? Why does the Vatican, the most powerful institution in Christian history, possess one of the world's most intimate collections of Egyptian magical and funerary objects? The answer is older than any museum, older than any saint. It begins in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium. Rome defeated the alliance of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Egypt fell, and the victors did what victors always do. They took what they wanted. But the conquest didn't end on the battlefield. It continued through centuries of appropriation, where statues of gods were repurposed as curiosities, and sacred mummies became trophies for the elite. The Vatican, of course, claims it preserved these relics to study Egypt's cultural legacy, to honor the past. But not everyone agrees. Some scholars argue that what stands inside those 9 rooms is not preservation, but possession, a spiritual victory carved in stone and silence. After all, imagine this. You walk into a room inside the Holy See. You see a mummy lying in a glass case. The linen is frayed. The air smells of resin and dust. And somewhere inside this wrapped shell is the body of a priest or priestess, once buried to ensure a safe journey into the afterlife. Now that body lies beneath the Christian cross, stripped of its purpose, its soul displaced, its afterlife stolen. And here's the part few realize. Most of these artifacts were not voluntarily donated or respectfully exchanged. They were spoils of power, claimed during imperial campaigns, crusades, and even private looting under church patronage. Even today, modern Egypt continues to appeal for the return of its cultural heritage, while the Vatican remains silent. But the discomfort runs deeper than imperial theft. It's the symbolic reversal that stings. A civilization that once worshipped the gods of death now has its relics sealed within the walls of the Church of Eternal Life. Some believe the Church kept these objects to control what they represented, to hide spiritual knowledge that predates its own theology, to silence belief systems that dared to speak of resurrection long before Christianity claimed it. Because if Egyptian magic promised life after death, and if that promise was made millennia before Christ, then what does that say about the stories we've been told? The Gregorian Museum isn't just a vault of history. It's a contradiction in stone, a place where two civilizations, two theologies, two worlds are locked in quiet opposition. And perhaps that's the most haunting truth of all. Sometimes the most powerful way to erase a belief system isn't to burn it. It's to bury it inside your own house, put it on display, call it a curiosity, and let its silence speak louder than its gods ever did. In the deserts of Egypt, where the sun carves shadows deep into the ruins of time, there are places so forgotten, even the wind doesn't know their names. And in one of these nameless places, in a garbage heap littered with broken pottery, animal bones, and ancient tax receipts, a secret was discovered. It wasn't golden. It wasn't enshrined. It wasn't buried with kings or kept beneath cathedrals. It was on a scrap of papyrus, written in Greek, nearly thrown away with the rest of civilization's leftovers. But what it said shook the foundations of Scripture itself. It was a lost text, a forbidden gospel, a fragment of something scholars would later identify as the first apocalypse of James, a writing so radical it had been condemned by the early church, purged from canon, and erased from memory for nearly 2,000 years. Why? Because it dared to tell a version of Jesus Christ the world was never supposed to hear. In this manuscript, Jesus does not speak of divine glory. He does not preach to crowds or recite the parables of the New Testament. Instead, he speaks privately to James, his brother. And what he says is a spiritual landmine. According to this gospel, the world is not a divine creation. It is a prison, a cosmic illusion crafted by a false god, a deceiver, not the Father of light. This world, Jesus says, is a trap, a false system meant to enslave the soul. And salvation doesn't come from obedience to church doctrine, but from inner awakening, from recognizing that the true God, the source of eternal light, is not the God of the material world. To the early church, this was heresy, a threat, a fire waiting to burn through everything they were building. So they buried it, literally. They labeled it Gnostic blasphemy, banned its copying, excommunicated its believers, and hunted its surviving texts to extinction. But like all suppressed truths, it didn't die. It waited in silence under centuries of dust, until it was found in that Egyptian trash heap in the 1940s. Since then, more of these so-called heretical gospels have surfaced. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Judas. Each offers a vastly different vision of Jesus, not as a divine sacrifice, but as a mystical teacher, urging humanity to seek the light within. And here's the unsettling part. Some of these Gospels, now studied in elite universities, may very well exist in full, unredacted form inside the Vatican's secret archives. But the Church has never released them. Why? Because if the public were to read these writings, if billions of believers suddenly saw a Jesus who defied religious hierarchy, who rejected blind obedience, and who claimed that God was not outside of us, but already within, what would happen to the system? What would happen to control? The Vatican insists these texts are false, that they were written too late, that they were rejected by consensus, by divine guidance. But here's the irony. The Church never claims they're meaningless, only that they're dangerous. Because when a gospel tells you to find salvation without the Church, to hear God without a priest, and to escape a false creation, it doesn't just challenge dogma, it undoes it. So the question becomes, if these teachings truly are fiction, why work so hard to hide them? And if they're not, then how much of what we call heresy was actually the earliest form of truth? For centuries, they lay still, wrapped in linen, tucked behind glass, their hollow eyes staring into eternity. Quiet tokens of a civilization long vanished. They were displayed deep within the Vatican's museum corridors. 2 Egyptian mummies, solemn, sacred, untouchable. They were considered relics, proof of the Vatican's connection to the ancient world, proof that even Rome could embrace the wisdom of the Nile. But proof is only powerful when it's true. Because in 2010, a scientific investigation changed everything. It started with a quiet request. The Smithsonian Institution, granted rare access, took DNA samples from the bones beneath the linen. The Vatican approved, confident in the authenticity of its centuries-old treasures. But when the results came back, they didn't point to ancient Egypt, not even close. The remains were just 500 years old. One was a man, one was a woman, and neither had ever seen the banks of the Nile. They weren't high priests. They weren't nobles. They were medieval Europeans. And yet, they were mummified, deliberately, as if someone wanted the world to believe they were something else. The revelation was met with quiet horror. How could it happen? How could 2 completely unrelated corpses end up inside Vatican glass cases, mistaken for pharaohs? The answer lies in the strangest chapter of 19th century Europe, a chapter few talk about today. It was called Mummy Mania. Across the continent, aristocrats, collectors, even clergymen became obsessed with ancient Egypt. They bought mummies at auctions. They displayed them in drawing rooms. Some even ground them into powder to make so-called mummy medicine, used as a tonic for wealth and vigor. The demand was monstrous, the supply limited. So grave robbers, con men, and forgers found a workaround. They created fakes. They took fresh corpses, treated them with resin, spices, and linen, mimicking Egyptian techniques, and then sold them as relics of the ancients. And somehow, 2 of those forgeries found their way into the Vatican. The Church had likely acquired them in good faith, as part of a growing museum collection meant to demonstrate global knowledge. But without realizing it, they had become custodians of a lie. Because these were not mummies, they were illusions, deceptions wrapped in linen, made not to honor the dead, but to sell a fantasy. And the question that lingers like dust in the archive air is this: how many more artifacts are fakes? How many relics that we revere, paintings, bones, scrolls, even saints, are actually crafted stories, protected not for their truth, but for the power their illusion still holds? The Vatican quietly reclassified the two mummies. They remain on display, no longer called Egyptian. But no public statement was made. No deeper investigation was announced. No apology given. Because in the world of faith and relics, sometimes it's more dangerous to uncover the truth than to display the lie. And here's what makes this story so haunting. It's not just about mummies. It's about the terrifying ease with which history can be fabricated, and the even greater ease with which institutions can look away. They say death is the great equalizer, that no king, no pope, no prophet escapes the touch of time. And yet, behind the marble pillars of the Vatican, there are bodies that have defied that truth, bodies that never decomposed, flesh that never rotted, skin that remained soft, supple, as if death had paused. For centuries. They call it incorruptibility, and in Catholic tradition, it is considered a miracle, a sign of sainthood, a divine fingerprint left on those deemed most holy. But what if the miracle was man-made? Inside St. Peter's Basilica, beneath the glittering ceiling of the Vatican's most sacred chamber, lies the body of Pope John XXIII. He died in 1963. But if you were to see him today, lying in his glass coffin, his hands folded in eternal prayer, you would swear he had passed only yesterday. His face is peaceful, his skin nearly untouched. Time, it seems, has no power here. For decades, the Church offered no explanation. Pilgrims came from across the world to witness the miracle. Some wept, others whispered prayers. But behind closed doors, something else was happening. Between 1975 and 2008, a secret group of Vatican specialists, embalmers, chemists, anatomical experts, was quietly tasked with preserving the bodies of over 30 saints and church figures. Not through divine intervention, but through science. This was not speculation. It became a documented truth when leaked papers revealed internal procedures, burial protocols, and chemical compounds used by Vatican embalmers. Among them, a mix of Egyptian techniques, modern preservatives, and surgical alterations. The irony? They were using ancient pagan methods to manufacture Christian miracles. But not every attempt succeeded. In 1958, when Pope Pius XII died, his embalmers attempted a method meant to emulate Christ's burial, wrapped in linen, sealed in a tomb. What followed was a catastrophe. The preservation failed. His body bloated, his skin darkened. The stench became unbearable, so much so that a Swiss guard reportedly fainted beside the coffin. His nose collapsed, and the Vatican was forced to close the chamber and hide the remains from public view. Still, the practice continued, not because of faith, but because of image, because when a body doesn't decay, people believe. Pilgrimages grow, donations rise, and legends write themselves. But here's the haunting twist. Many of these saints never asked to be embalmed. They never consented to eternal display. Their deaths, once humble and sacred, were turned into exhibits. And the question that echoes through the marble halls of the Vatican is one that no one dares answer. If a miracle is manufactured, does it still hold meaning? And worse, if the Church knowingly manipulates nature to create symbols of the divine, what else has been curated, designed, repackaged to look like faith, but smell like power. Today, the incorrupt saints lie in glass tombs, their silence louder than sermons. They are symbols, not just of devotion, but of a system willing to play God, if only to keep control of the story. And maybe that's the greatest mystery of all. Not that bodies can defy time, but that the line between miracle and manipulation has grown so thin, we no longer know which side of it we're standing on. So the doors to the Vatican vaults may have closed. But what if these were only the secrets we were allowed to find? What lies deeper, beneath the sealed floors, the erased records, the names no one dares speak? Subscribe to Nexora, where every mystery leads to the next shadow, and in the next story, we go even deeper.